War Sovereign Soaring the Heavens, Chapter 788. But only Duan Lingtian was surprised by this now. The attention of almost everyone had been drawn by the group of young geniuses from the other three dynasties. Earlier, these young geniuses had attacked in unison to kill the other three young men that had concealed their ages to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. Originally, they'd learned from Lu Yong with the intention of obtaining favor of the vice fort master and obtain the extremely precious concept fragments. But now, they were bound to be dreaming. Not to mention it was impossible for so many people to be taken as a disciple by the vice fort master. It was impossible that the vice fort master would take their actions of copying Lu Yong's actions seriously. Continue. In next to no time, Ning Kan's stern voice sounded out, and it caused the young geniuses of the three dynasties to return to their original positions in succession, whereas when Lu Yong returned to the group of young geniuses from Darming dynasty, he was greeted by numerous burning gazes. Zhao Weiyi stared at Lu Yong with eyes that contained flames of envy that leaped out into appearance and was practically capable of burning anything into ash. At this moment, his heart was filled with unwillingness. On what basis? On what basis has Lu Yong suppressed me in the past and has even obtained an extremely great fortune now, causing him to have the momentum to forever stand above me? He was unwilling. But no matter how unwilling he was, this matter had already become inevitable. When the gazes of everyone was placed on Feng Wei and Elder Qian, who were in a short moment of confrontation, Lu Yong had moved resolutely and won a fortune for himself. Sometimes, fortune was so opportune. An opportunity was momentary and only lasted for an instant. In the blink of an eye, 5 out of the 100 young geniuses from the 10 dynasties had perished. The people that hadn't had their ages measured amongst the remaining 95 young geniuses placed their hands successively on the age-measuring pearl in the hand of the Skywolf Fort Elder. At the side of the Darkhan dynasty, everyone successively underwent the test. After Suli, Bai Hao, Zi Shang, and Long Yun became the temporary centers of attention. Because their ages were below 35 and Long Yun was even only a little over 30 years old, causing him to be even younger than Bai Hao and Zi Shang. Saber 5, looks like you've taken a good disciple. Ning Kan, who saw Long Yun's test results, smiled as he spoke to Saber 5. Slight complacency suffused Saber 5's face when he heard this. Meanwhile, only Duan Lingtian and Feng Tianwu on the side of the Darkhan dynasty hadn't undergone their test. Big brother Duan, you go first. Feng Tianwu lightly smiled as she looked at Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian didn't refuse and moved forward to arrive before the Skywolf Fort Elder. The Skywolf Fort Elder couldn't help but be slightly surprised when he saw Duan Lingtian. Just from outward appearance, the violet-clothed young man before him was only around the age of 25. When Duan Lingtian's hand was placed on the age-measuring pearl, besides Suli, the gazes of all the other young geniuses from Darkhan dynasty descended onto Duan Lingtian. Even the 2 vice fort master of Skywolf Fort were no exception. Amongst the group of young geniuses present, it was undoubtedly Duan Lingtian and Feng Tianwu who looked the youngest. Moreover, both of them were similarly from the Darkhan dynasty, so it was difficult for them to not draw attention. Even some of the representatives and young geniuses of the other dynasties couldn't help but turn and look at Duan Lingtian now, as they wanted to know Duan Lingtian's true age. The reason Suli wasn't surprised was because he'd known Duan Lingtian since long ago. All those years ago when he'd seen Duan Lingtian for the first time in the Iron Blood Army's genius camp, he was 18 and Duan Lingtian was 16, and it was precisely because of this that he'd always remembered that Duan Lingtian was younger than him by 2 years. Age-measuring pearl. Duan Lingtian stretched his hand out to touch the age-measure pearl. Instantly, he felt a warm energy being emitted from the age-measuring pearl, and it flowed through his entire body in the blink of an eye. In next to no time, this warm energy returned to the age-measuring pearl. Meanwhile, 8 yellow ribbons appeared on the age-measuring pearl, and it indicated that Duan Lingtian's current age, 28. 28 years old. Instantly, many people that were paying close attention to Duan Lingtian couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Even though they could determine that Duan Lingtian ought to be below 30 years old from his outward appearance, when they really saw the outcome measured by the age-measuring pearl, they still couldn't help but feel a wave of shock. I truly never imagined that there's an existence below the age of 30 amongst the 10 young geniuses from the Darkhan dynasty. Even young people like this have come. Looks like the Darkhan dynasty really has nobody else. Many people looked at Duan Lingtian and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Humph. When they saw Duan Lingtian in the limelight, the face of all of the people that weren't on good terms with Duan Lingtian like Zi Shang, Zhao Weiyi, and the others sank, and their eyes flickered with cold lights. "What's your name?" Meanwhile, the vice fort master of Skywolf Fort, Ning Kan, looked at Duan Lingtian and asked with a light smile. The question of Ning Kan's caused many young geniuses to reveal envious expressions as they looked at Duan Lingtian. They were able to discern that this vice fort master had aroused quite an amount of interest towards Duan Lingtian. Looks like this Duan Lingtian is going to be taken as a disciple by the vice fort master of Skywolf Fort. I think it might not necessarily be like that. Even though Duan Lingtian is young, he hasn't revealed his cultivation, and before his cultivation is revealed, his value is undetermined, so it ought to be insufficient to make Vice Fort Master Ning take him as a disciple. Many people whispered in discussion and spoke similar words. Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian looked at Ning Kan and looked at him neither arrogantly nor humbly. "You're really not bad. So long as you're able to pass the first round of the selections, then I, Ning Kan, the Vice Fort Master of Skywolf Fort, will be willing to take you as my personal disciple." Ning Kan raised his voice and spoke. According to Ning Kan's tone, it was as if him being willing to take Duan Lingtian as his personal disciple was fortune that Duan Lingtian had accumulated for 3 lifetimes, and at the same time, he didn't think that Duan Lingtian would refuse. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but frown when he heard Ning Kan, and he neither agreed nor disagreed. "Want to take me as your personal disciple? That will depend on if I'm willing." Duan Lingtian was unhappy here, whereas those young geniuses instead revealed envious expression as they looked at him, and all of them wished for nothing more than to swallow him up. Even though Ning Kan didn't directly take Duan Lingtian as his disciple, the promise Ning Kan made still caused the group of young geniuses to be unable to help but feel envious in their hearts. Why didn't we get such treatment? If they found out about Duan Lingtian's current thoughts, they would probably have the intention of killing Duan Lingtian. Right at this moment, Sword 13, who stood silently at the side, glanced indifferently at Ning Kan before he said, "Ning Kan, it isn't that I'm looking down on you. But you probably don't have the qualifications to take Duan Lingtian as your disciple." "Don't have the qualifications." Sword 13's words were like a stone that caused 1,000 waves, and it caused the atmosphere at the scene to go deathly silent. All the young geniuses that revealed envious gazes when they looked at Duan Lingtian were completely dumbstruck. Every single one of them wished for nothing more than to become the personal disciple of Ning Kan, the Vice Fort Master of Skywolf Fort. Yet now, someone said that Ning Kan didn't have the qualifications to take Duan Lingtian as his disciple, and at the same time that it caused them to feel disbelief, their gazes descended successively onto Sword 13. If these words were spoken by anyone else, they might have already spoken out in ridicule. But these words were spoken by Sword 13, an expert from Blade sect, a power in the foreign lands that wasn't inferior to Skywolf Fort. Sword 13, what do you mean by this? Nang Kan's face sank as Sword 13's words had undoubtedly slapped him on the face in public, so how could he endure it? Sword 13, this is the Skywolf Fort and not your Blade sect. Feng Wei spoke angrily as well. What do I mean? Sword 13 disregarded Feng Wei and looked at Nang Kan as he said indifferently, Nang Kan, didn't you clearly hear what I meant? You don't have the qualifications to take Duan Ling Tian as your disciple. Nang Kan's expression became even darker when he heard this. Sword 13, today is the day of the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, so I won't argue with you. But this doesn't mean that I, Nang Kan, am afraid of you. Whether I have the qualifications to become Duan Ling Tian's master isn't something you can interfere in. After he finished speaking, Nang Kan paid no further attention to Sword 13. It's good to be confident, but I'm just afraid some people are overestimating their ability. Am I right, Duan Ling Tian? As he finished speaking, Sword 13 intentionally glanced at Duan Ling Tian and caused Duan Ling Tian to be unable to help but laugh bitterly, yet he didn't answer Sword 13. If he were to speak the truth now, it would undoubtedly offend Nang Kan. If he lied, then not to mention he wouldn't do it, but even if he did, it would offend Sword 13. Moreover, Sword 13 was a senior that he respected, so it was impossible for him to offend Sword 13. So, he chose to keep silent. Subsequently, the measuring continued. On the side of the Darkhan dynasty, only Feng Tianwu remained, and after Feng Tianwu walked out, it once again drew the gazes of many people present in the surroundings. Heavens! Could it be that the Darkhan dynasty really has nobody else? This person is even younger than Duan Ling Tian, and she's even a woman. Looks like the Darkhan dynasty has really declined. The young geniuses and representatives of the various dynasties sighed with emotion, and their words seemed as if they looked down extremely upon Feng Tianwu. When facing these emotional sighs, Duan Ling Tian's eyes narrowed as a faint smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. If these fellows knew Feng Tianwu's strength now, they'd probably not think like this. Whoosh! Meanwhile, Feng Tianwu's hand had already been placed on the age measuring pearl, and 5 yellow ribbons appeared on it to indicate her current age, 25 years old. This age was also the youngest age amongst the young geniuses from the 10 dynasties that had come to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, and it was sufficient to shock anyone. 25 years old. I hadn't even stepped into the void initiation stage when I was 25. Even though it shows that there's no capable people in the younger generation of the Darkhan dynasty, since a woman like this has obtained the qualification to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. But I presume this woman is a martial artist at the void initiation stage as well. This natural talent can be considered to be not bad. Especially because she's a woman, and she's much better than I was all those years ago. In next to no time, a wave of discussion arose in the surroundings, and besides the group of people from the Darkhan dynasty, at least 90% of the people present doubted Feng Tianwu's strength, whereas, Feng Tianwu didn't mind as well. She would use her strength to make all these people who looked down upon her shut their mouths. A crowd of short-sighted people, pitiable. Duan Ling Tian muttered to himself as he glanced indifferently at those people that looked down on Feng Tianwu. I hope you enjoy the video. Don't forget like, share, subscribe to channels.